Recently, I've been without electricity at home for over 32 hours. Even in these parts of the Western Cape, some people have spent 60 hours or more without electricity. And in other parts of the country, it's even worse. So how do we deal with the rolling blackouts in South Africa, also called load shedding? And do we actually face a nationwide grid collapse? I'm going to share some great tips from my friends who've been without electricity for extended periods of time, as well as what I've personally done in order to prepare for a grid collapse. I'm Clarice. Welcome to the Live Ready channel. In the event of a total grid collapse, most people would probably not realize initially that the entire grid has collapsed. Until somebody realizes that they're no longer able to contact anybody anywhere in the country, the power has been off for an extended period of time, communications is down. This is especially true in a country such as South Africa, where rolling blackouts are commonplace. I mean, it's an everyday occurrence. Power cuts in South Africa are so commonplace that we even have an app for it. Sounds a lot like a swear word. Well, I'm sure there are some Afrikaans people who have added some explicits into that. So we would really go about our daily lives in the event of a total grid collapse until somebody notices that they're not getting their Facebook notifications, their WhatsApps aren't going through, they can't make phone calls or even video calls abroad, and they're completely cut off communications-wise. So a lot of South Africans have made some really cool plans in order to be able to continue with daily activities like cooking or boiling water or being able to shower in some hot water. So there are other means that we can use to do that. We don't necessarily need to heat water through a geyser. I've boiled pots of water on the stove in order to take a hot shower before. I've got a 12-volt pump system that I just use if the water in the geyser has gone completely cold. But you can use gas in order to cook your food or boil your water. And in this instance, we can actually take a page from some of the folks abroad who have started developing and really use wood stoves often. In South Africa, wood stove is not an unfamiliar object, but the smaller, more mobile ones is something that you don't actually get in this country. So I got this one off of Amazon. They are particularly expensive because they are small and mobile. So this is actually my camping wood stove. I've installed it into my tent. But it's really great because you can use it in your home as well. So some of the challenges that we have to overcome if we don't have electricity and if there is a total grid collapse is going to be warming our homes, cooking our food, boiling our water. And we can make do without electricity for that. And it can seem like quite a daunting task to prepare for a total grid collapse. But remember, Matthew 6:33 tells us to seek first the kingdom of God and everything else shall be given to you. So our focus should not just be to have the gear and to physically have prepared our homes for a grid collapse. We should also focus spiritually on trusting and relying on God for the things that we need. Most of the South African population can't afford to put a huge solar array into their homes. This is worsened by our weakened economy, which is again worsened by the rolling blackouts and a lack of infrastructure and general maintenance thereof. So to even just have a mobile solar setup in your home can be really worthwhile, but even that costs money. So it takes some finances and planning in order to be able to do that. Now, this country as it stands really is at risk of a nationwide blackout. How imminent that threat is and how concerned we should be in the immediate future is anybody's guess. But it really is better to have thought through that scenario and have considered what one would do and what the implications are thereof, rather than to have discarded the idea because it's just not really nice to think about. The question is, realistically, what would a nationwide blackout look like? So I'm going to start small scale here and I'm going to work up to the larger scale effect of something like that. So what I've got here are just a couple of things that some South Africans have started using in their homes in order to ensure that they can continue with some of their daily routines, activities. So we can put in huge solar arrays into our homes, but it's not the answer entirely either. I know people whose entire homes are on solar, but because we've had such bad weather in the Western Cape recently, people have started on DIY wind turbine projects because they need to supplement their solar array somehow. If there's no sun, they can't power their appliances from that either. So one can implement a smaller, more mobile system. What I've got here is basically just what I use in my vehicle when I go camping or if I'm filming somewhere in the bush. So I've just got an EcoFlow River Pro. It's really actually quite a small solar power generator, but it's perfectly fine for me to charge devices from, and I can even work some appliances on it. I've also got a 100-watt rolling power solar panel. They're really easy to come by. I got this one off of Takealot, and they're inexpensive in comparison to some of the other solar panels on the market as well. Now, one of the huge problems that we've had in this country is people's appliances breaking due to the surges from the electricity being turned on and off. And the other thing is, during that time where there's no electricity, especially if it's for a couple of days at a time, everything in people's fridges and freezers defrost and it goes off. So you basically lose a month's worth of groceries if you can't make another plan in order to keep that food cold or frozen. Now, these Dometic fridges are hyper efficient. They really are particularly good at keeping things cold or even freezing them, especially if you plug them into something like a solar power generator with a solar panel. You can keep that running indefinitely as long as you've got a bit of sunshine. The other issue that we've had is as soon as it gets dark, it becomes really difficult to do anything. So what I've done is I've just gotten some rechargeable lights that I can plug into either the EcoFlow or into the mains power, charge them during the day, and then at night when I need some light in order to do some tasks in the evening, then I've got some light. Another really clever idea is to get a rechargeable headlamp. So this is a black diamond headlamp that's just got a lithium-ion battery that recharges. It's really cool to have because you can just plug your battery in. Some of these rechargeable headlamps you can even just plug right into a power source. You don't even have to remove the battery. Following the immediate consequences of a total grid collapse, we start to see some of the longer term effects playing out. And I think snag number one here is really going to be communications. Like I said, most people are just going to go about their daily lives and not really realize that the grid is down until you start noticing that comms go down. Because we're so dependent on the internet for communication and on cell phone towers for communication, those are the things that are really going to alarm us to something being really wrong here. Now, this is something that I've noticed during periods of extended electrical failure, is after a while the cell phone towers go down. Usually they have a battery system, and in the CBDs there may even be some cell phone towers that have a generator or backup generator that they can run off of, so those towers may stay on for a longer period of time. But eventually what happens is all communications go down. There was an interesting story of a South African small town, I think somewhere in the Free State, that was isolated for a period of 3 days because their electrical grid failed because of a big storm. And they said the one problem that made everything else so much more difficult was the fact that they couldn't communicate with the outside world. The only way that anybody could contact anyone outside of the town was if they had two-way radios installed in their vehicles. Obviously, you can run the two-way radio off of the vehicle's battery. Now, being able to communicate in a grid failure is actually really important for two reasons. One, you want to be able to keep up to date of what is actually happening and the progression of events. And the other one is to be able to locate resources and loved ones. So our operations plan here is to acquire two-way radios, particularly the ones that you can put in your vehicle or run off of a mobile power system. Speaking of communications, if you'd like to be part of a community of like-minded people, particularly in an event such as what I'm describing here, go down to the links in the description of this video. There is a link to the Live Ready Patreon page. It gives you access to the Discord server, which is basically a community of like-minded people who stay in communication with one another. If you've got comments, questions, or anything that you'd like to share with the community or get feedback on, that's going to be the place to do it. The Patreon page also allows me to continue making videos such as this one for you guys. Now, the reason why I'm sharing all this gear on the table here today is to show you that you don't have to spend hundreds of thousands of rands putting in a huge solar array in your home, which you may have to eventually abandon in any case. I certainly don't have a big solar array at home, but I've made some other plans, and these are just some different options that you can consider in your own preparedness plan. Now, snag number two if the grid goes down is that not just are the cell phone towers providing services to our cell phones, they often provide service to some of the card machines as well. And what I recently saw was if the card machines don't work and you don't have cash, you can't buy fuel, either to stay mobile or to run generators. So the operations plan for this would be to keep some extra fuel stores. So these 2 jerry cans are 2 front runner jerry cans that basically live on my roof rack. They're just about always full of fuel. Now remember, you can't store fuel indefinitely. It does have a storage lifespan. So I do change it out every so now and then. Basically every time I go on holiday, I empty out the 2 jerry cans and put new fuel in them. And in some instances, buying something like a small generator can be less expensive than buying something like a solar power generator. Even the little mobile ones can be quite expensive. So there are different options for different budgets here. And that brings me to the next snag. If fuel stations are not able to sell fuel other than for cash, then the stores won't be able to sell goods for a long period of time either. And remember, ATMs also essentially require electricity to continue functioning. There may be a period of time where they can work on a backup power source, but after a while you're not going to be able to draw cash from ATMs. So a good idea is to draw as much cash as you can if you notice that there is a grid problem, so that you are able to still acquire some resources. The other thing you can do is to keep some food stores in your home. Consider keeping maybe just a week or 2 weeks worth of extra food supplies, depending on what you can afford to do in your home. And it's not something that you have to do in 1 month. Maybe for 1 month, buy 2 packets of rice and store the 1 packet, and next month you add something else, so that you build up an extra supply of food and groceries. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be an MRE. MREs are actually relatively expensive. It can be something as simple as some protein bars or some noodles or some rice, some canned foods that you just keep in your home, so that if you're unable to buy supplies from a store, that you have an extra stash, not just for yourself, but also for your neighbors or for friends or family who may be in need during that time. We are also required to be courteous to the people around us and to try and help those who are in need. Remember, not everybody is going to be prepared for a grid collapse. In recent months, there's been a cholera outbreak in some parts of South Africa, and I think it highlights the importance that our municipal services play in our daily lives. But our municipal services are very often also dependent on the grid. If the electrical grid goes down, there are many municipalities that can't actually pump clean water to homes. Now we have to consider how many of our municipal services are really reliant on electricity and on fuel for that matter as well. So if we can't get fuel to remain mobile, what other services are also not going to be able to remain mobile? What about refuse or sewage removal? And what about the pumping of clean water to our homes? So it's really important to be able to have some other means to purify your drinking water in particular. There are some like drop options or products that you can add to your water. These are some Aqua Salvia drops that I just got off Takealot. Key Distribution sells these in large quantities as well. You can get that off Takealot too. Or something as small as a Soya Mini. It is important to note that these products don't remove viruses from your water. So they will remove cholera, for example, but viral particles such as hepatitis or mad cow disease, the things that cause dysentery, or even coronaviruses are not removed from water by these products. The gold standard is still to be able to boil your water, and for that you need to be able to make fire. So we go full circle right back to the gas bottle or to the wood stove, where we have a source to heat our water. Being able to mitigate the risk of contracting waterborne diseases is also important because of the pressure on the medical industry during such a collapse. Think about the implications of being severely ill during a grid collapse. It really is the last thing you want. So don't take any chances with your health during such a time. It's also important to have some extra stores of medication, particularly chronic medications. And if you think that you're not going to be able to get your next dose of chronic medication because there has been a grid collapse, consider calling your pharmacy or your doctor and seeing if there is something that you can do in order to ensure that you're still able to get your medical treatment. The next snag during a total grid collapse is that the general population starts to panic. Most societies are actually just a tinderbox waiting for a spark, and it doesn't really take a whole lot for a society to put their heads on a stick and absolutely lose it and start looting and become violent during something like a grid collapse. And total grid collapse may well be followed by societal collapse as well. So at this point, it is really good to have some of the other means to defend yourself and your family. But better yet, you should actually at this point have left any area where you may be at risk or in harm's way. There is a window of opportunity for you to leave the area. If you miss that window, you may well get gridlocked or barricaded into an area where there is violence or looting, and you may not be able to get out anymore. So rather leave while you have the opportunity. Take your family, move them to a safer location, move out of the cities or out of highly populated areas. You can always come back to your home at a later stage. Consider also that during the time that you are waiting to find out whether the grid is really down, that you start packing some things in your vehicle. Start getting yourself ready to be mobile and to move during that time. So if you notice that the situation is systematically worsening, that you're already ready to leave your home or wherever you have been waiting during that time. As the situation progresses, you're going to find that you have less access to resources. Like I said, fuel stations and services such as municipal services, as well as the stores, are no longer going to be able to supply us with the things that we generally need. And the less access we have to gear and resources, the more we're going to have to start relying on skills. And that's why wilderness skills and preparedness go hand in hand. The last snag here is authoritarian opportunism. So along with a panicking population and opportunistic vandalism, history has taught us that chaos creates the perfect storm for an authoritarian regime to dig down its roots. It's for this exact reason that staged coups are usually preceded by engineered mass chaos. A panicking population is vulnerable and susceptible to the whims of an authoritarian regime or a political coup. This has its own implications for the population in general, but the Rwandan genocide is a very good example of this. Now, by this time, you really should be bugging out somewhere in the hinterland, and you should have a mobile comm system, a mobile water system, mobile fuel system, and a mobile electrical system set up for yourself and for your family at this point, so that you are able to live off-grid or wait off-grid until things settle down. So how long will it take to restore the grid if it collapses? It really depends on what the cause of the collapse was. In South Africa's case, I think we have so much destruction of infrastructure, and the lack of maintenance makes it almost impossible for us to get our main power supplier back up to where it should be. We really do have a failing grid. But at the same time, this has created an enormous opportunity for private institutions or even for people in their homes to set themselves up off-grid completely. How we cope with something like a grid collapse is also going to be very dependent on our mentality about it. So how do we cope with the blackouts in South Africa? Well, we've basically taken what real issues are, things like food stores going off or not having lights and not having hot water, and systematically implemented solutions to those problems. I've got friends who are so used to having long periods of time without electricity that they have made friends with the local ice factory and basically go and buy a big block of dry ice every time the electricity goes down and put it in their freezer in order to keep their food cold. UPS systems have become very popular in South African homes, but they do run completely flat after a period of time, and this obviously damages the batteries, which becomes an expensive way to maintain an electrical setup in your home, because you also have to continually replace the batteries. I hope this discussion has given you some food for thought and perhaps even a place to start your preparation for a total grid collapse. Leave a comment below, let me know what your thoughts are. Remember to like this video, and until the next time, live ready.